Good afternoon. Welcome to this regular meeting of the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation for December 11th, 2024. My name is Steve Brandt, and I'm the president of the Board of Estimate. We'll begin with an announcement by our clerk, a matter of protocol.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments.
At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so that we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Fry is absent. Commissioner Bene.
Here.
Commissioner Payne.
Present.
Commissioner Chuktai is absent. Vice President Priest-Stinson.
Present.
President Brandt.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record show that we have a quorum. I'll now offer an acknowledgement that today we meet on the land that has historically been held by the Dakota people. Before beginning with the business items on our agenda, I'd like to present on behalf of commissioners an honorary resolution for our beloved legislative clerk, Lisa Brock, who will be retiring at the end of this year. I will now read this aloud and we will act on it at the end of our agenda. Resolution 2024-009, commemorating and thanking Lisa Brock for her service and dedication to the city of Minneapolis. Resolved by the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation. Whereas the Board of Estimate and Taxation's work is ably advanced by the work of the City Clerk's office, and whereas Lisa Brock has served notice that she will retire from the office of City Clerk at the end of December 2024, and whereas Lisa Brock has served the City of Minneapolis faithfully for 15 years, and whereas Lisa Brock began her city employment in 2010 in the demanding role of policy aide in the First Ward office, assisting Councilmember Kevin Reich. Whereas Lisa Brock was thereafter hired as a legislative clerk in the clerk's office in 2021. And whereas Lisa Brock has served diligently as a clerk to the Board of Estimate and Taxation since 2022. And whereas Lisa Brock has faithfully assisted board presidents in the execution of their duties, including guiding them through procedural thickets, saving them from embarrassing mistakes, and making sure they sign resolutions properly, even down to the color of ink. And whereas, above all, Lisa Brock has been a darn pleasant coworker who always remembers bus tokens and parking passes for board members. Therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Estimate and Taxation that the Board thanks Lisa for her service and kindnesses and wishes her a long and happy retirement for many years on the Board. Would any commissioners like to add to those remarks? Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
I have had the pleasure of knowing our clerk, Miss Lisa Brock, from a resident of the ward, where she would take my calls and my complaints and agitations with such grace. And then coming into City Hall as a senior policy advisor myself under previous Councilmember Cunningham. The knowledge, the wisdom, the support, and the mentorship in learning how to conduct myself properly within these city walls and know how to walk that line and get people to work together and do it with grace and with integrity is something that I have loved and appreciated about her. And so in then becoming an elected official myself, it was a relief to see a very friendly face that I was familiar with to, as we said, keep me from making dumb mistakes, using the right color of ink, and even driving to my home when we forgot to sign the thing and waiting for me because I forgot. And so it's for these reasons that I have so much love and appreciation, adoration, well-deserved retirement, and I look forward to seeing what you do next, which I hope priority is relaxation. Well-deserved. And we are lucky as a city to have had a public servant such as you that has served in the way that you have. And so I want to thank you for that service. We're making the rounds with the card, and we have a few things for you, but thank you, Ms. Brock.
Mayor, Commissioner Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Lisa, I've known you for a long time, and what I've found is that during the most tense and difficult of situations, you're always a bright, shining light that helps us get through. You've been a mainstay here at City Hall, whether it's working in Ward 1 office or managing these meetings, and the level of light that you bring to, again, tense situations is so deeply appreciated. You've always been a great friend and colleague, and I just want to let you know that everybody here, the 4,000 or so city employees appreciate you deeply, and the 435,000 people that have benefited from your service. And truly, you've helped. You've helped a whole lot of people. Thank you.
All right. Would the clerk like to speak?
I would just like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. It has been such a pleasure to work with you and to do this work. And with those of you that I've known for a very long time, and those of you I'm just still getting to know, thank you so much. If I say more, I'll start to cry, so thank you.
All right, thank you. We will now continue with our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Board members, the agenda for today's meeting before us, may I have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda with the addition of the honorary resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The agenda as amended is adopted. Next is the acceptance of minutes from the November 13th, 2024 meeting. May I please have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We now have a proper motion before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are accepted as presented. Item 4 on our agenda today is the acceptance of public comment. We have nobody signed up to speak today, so we will continue with the next item on the agenda. I just want to remind members of the public that there is an opportunity at each Board of Estimate meeting to address an item that is on the board's agenda, and you can sign up with the city clerk's office for that. All right. Item number 5 is receiving the 2024 third quarter financial status report. I welcome our city controller, George Hargrove, to present the report.
I'll just take a minute here to get the presentation up on the screen, and then I'll start in just a second. Okay, so I'll start off here now. I'm happy to present the third quarter financial report for the city of Minneapolis. I want to give a special thank you to all the staff in finance, particularly Randy Hagar and Rach Oath that helped with this, helped put this together, and so very appreciative of them. Just to say a few words about the report in general, this report reflects a point in time as of September 30th. It's highly likely the business situations have changed since then. In addition, the information isn't audited and won't be final until 2024 is closed and we're audited at that point in time. Finance recommends this information not be used to make budget transfers, decisions, or anything without getting back to the departments, and we'll do our very best to get back to you right away should that occur or anything like that. Just talking about some of the financial highlights at the city. I think, as most of you know, in August of 2023, Fitch upgraded our credit rating to AAA, which is the highest rating available. Then since that time, since the second quarter presentation in September, Fitch and Standard & Poor's confirmed our AAA rating, so that continues. I'm also wanted to mention that the parking revenues are rebounding and are projected to be recovered to near the pre-pandemic levels. In addition, the property taxes for 2024 are projected to be about 21 million under budget. However, we do budget the very full amount, and we do the city usually does assume a 3% uncollectible rate that could be caused by either people's valuations being challenged in tax court or people simply not being able to pay. And then ARPA spending continues into 2024. I did want to mention that the city council did pass a resolution about a month or two ago to close out ARPA as at the end of this year. So we plan on making a transfer to the general fund and then using our revenue replacement option on the federal reporting site to report the rest of the spending in that category, anything that remains. So that'll help us totally spend down the $271 million. In terms of our investments, and you can, there's more information on our investments on one of the appendixes, one of the last pages of the detailed report. But I will say that the book value of our cash investments as of September 30th is down about 65 million from the same period last year to about $1,045,000. And book value is the price that we pay for the investments to start off with, as opposed to like current value, which is what it is as of today. In addition, there are a few funds here that are under our targets that we'd like to keep in terms of having reserves on hand. One is the self-insurance fund, and that actually has quite a bit of assets in cash. However, it has about over 220 million or so in liabilities, and so that's why it shows as a negative fund balance, even though it has almost 165 million in cash. The next area is actually a new area that got on the list this last period here in the third quarter, and that's the fleet services or the equipment fund. There was some rate reductions, I think, several years ago, and a lot of vehicles that they've ordered are starting to be delivered now. There was very, very long lead times on, as I think we all know, for vehicles during, especially right after the pandemic, and so they've had to pay for those, and so we expect the cash balance to be about a little over $1 million at the end of this year, which is about $4 million under the target. So something that we'll work on here with Public Works on that. The parking fund is also projected to be below the target, but the department is optimistic that they'll be able to get that back up above the target by sometime next year. But right now it's about 3.8 million under the target. And then property services is actually going to go off the list because they're above the target now, just in this third quarter here. Moving on to the general fund, so we'll kind of go over some of the individual funds that make up the city's financial records. The general fund is basically used to account for all spending that isn't restricted or isn't like a business enterprise or anything like that. So it's really our most unrestricted fund. A lot of it is funded by property tax. In terms of the cash balance, we're at about 148 million versus the year-end balance of about 231 million. It is more than it was as of the end of the second quarter, mainly due to the property taxes that were collected. We are projecting about $170 million ending balance in 2024. That's a decrease of about 40 million compared to 2023 year end. Fortunately, it does exceed the 17% minimum fund balance, which comes to about 114 million, which is about 56 million above the fund target. The 2024 budget originally had about $18.2 million planned use of fund balance. In addition, we rolled over another 26 million or so in what's called encumbrances. Those are generally legal obligations of the city, such as purchase orders or contracts. So that made it about 44 million. So of the 170 million or so in fund balance that we're projecting at year end, about 26 million we feel should be restricted. That's generally for the public safety aid and settlement agreements. So that leaves a little bit less than that, as terms of the unrestricted balance. And then the unrestricted balance we did calculate is projected to be at about 21.5% of the 2025 budget. So certainly our AAA bond rating, that's one of the factors that goes into that. So that is good news right now. The general fund revenue, just in terms of a little bit more detail of what makes that up, you can see almost half of it is property taxes. Otherwise, everything else is generally around the 50 million mark. You can see we have service charges, franchise, license permits, state aid, transfers. If you look at the chart down below, you'll see that the first two categories compared to the second quarter, when we did that presentation, we're actually down about $7-8 million since that time. But then, fortunately, we've kind of made that up in franchise fees and license and permits. So that's projected, to be up about $7 million compared to what we talked about last month when we went over the second quarter. In terms of the revenue, we're still holding with our projection of about $36 million under budget. You can see, how it tracks over the year. Not much of it's collected for the first half of the year, and the second half has most of the collections. Again, that's because the property tax comes in then as well too. We also because of accounting rules, we tend to book a little bit more revenue at the end of the year too, because we do bill out for anything in December, in early January. So it's been running about over the last 3 years about 105% over the 3 year, over budget on average for the last 3 years. Then in terms of the general fund expenditures, again, you can see it kind of follows the revenue. Most of the spending occurs in the second half of the year. It's not quite as pronounced as how the revenue goes, how the revenue comes in. It's a little bit more even, but again, because of accounting rules, in December we end up paying a couple months worth of invoices because some of the invoices we receive in January we charge back to the prior year. They are trending lower a little bit. You can see from the chart down below, compared to what we came here with at the second quarter, it's about we're projecting a little bit more favorability, especially in internal services and public safety, and so we're projecting the expenditures to be about $40 million under budget now versus I think $38 million when we were here last month, through the second quarter. So that helps the fund balance go up a little bit compared to what we thought a few months back. And then moreover, we can see the kind of the trend of the expenditures. You can see that they go up, as we saw in the previous graph through the year. Again, we're projecting, but the general fund expenditures to be under budget by about $40 million. So that's why you can see at the end that they tend to be pretty close to the 3-year average. That it's not uncommon to have the expenditures be a little bit under budget, as everyone tries to manage their budget that way. For the special revenue funds, this is another family of funds. The purpose of these funds is for funds that are generally restricted for specific uses, such as it could be because of the debt that maybe is issued, especially for things like the convention center, the Target Center. You can see the grants are considered special revenue funds. Again, there's usually external restrictions on these funds. You can see the total fund balance at the end of 2024 projected about $400 million. That's about a $15 million decrease compared to the 2023 year end. It's gotten a little bit, the special revenue funds have gone down. We've projected the fund balance to go down a little bit since the second quarter. Again, that's driven by the downtown assets, and a little bit in the CPID area too. The cash balance is down about, is at 354 million, down about 103 million compared to the 2023 year end. And as you can see from the second to last bullet point, that's mainly due to the ARPA funds that contained quite a bit of cash, because that cash was received up front several years ago, and now we project it to be pretty much spent down by that point in time. And then the next one is just a chart of kind of where the fund balances ended up in 2023 and our projections for 2024. I just want to point out, since last time, since the second quarter, the convention center is down a little bit, mainly due to revenue. In addition, the downtown assets is down a little bit, generally due to increase in debt service that's being paid off. The other area that I was noticing is in community planning and development. That's down a little bit too as well too. So you can see kind of in a little bit more detail what makes up the numbers that I presented on the previous slide. Internal service funds are more what we call, they're part of what's called the proprietary fund family. They generally operate like businesses, but in this case, their business is generally to sell goods or services within the city to city departments. You can see it includes things like the engineering materials and testing lab, the fleet that we talked about a little earlier, property services, provide space to people, public works stores, our IT department, our self-insurance funds that cover some of the major liabilities here at the city. The total net position, again, the net position is assets less the liabilities. So those things we look at both the assets such as cash and the liabilities, and you can see that we're projecting about a net position of about 79 million, which is about 10 million under the 2023 year-end projection. Most of that, or I should say the 2023 year-end actual net position, and most of that's related to fleet as well too. Cash, we're projecting year-end at about 187 million. That's a little increase from 2023. And again, that's driven by our self-insurance fund as well as our property services area and IT as well too. So again, we try to we try to keep this fund with consistent spending, to keep within the budget amounts and to kind of keep within the target balances we need. Just like any business needs, it needs a certain amount of reserves to operate. And then you can look at a little bit more detail here on this chart of all our internal services funds. You can see the biggest change from the second quarter was the equipment services, or otherwise known as fleet. That's down about $10 million for both cash and net positions. So that kind of means that the liabilities didn't really change much, but it's more spending on capital equipment there. That's a little bit offset by the intergovernmental services, which is mainly IT. That's up about $6 million. And then finally, we're down to our last group of funds here to talk about today. It's our enterprise funds. These are the closest to, I'd say, a private business in that they operate like a business and they also sell services to the outside public, as opposed to mainly internal, for the last group of funds we went over. So a lot of this comes from utilities that the city operates, such as the sewer, the stormwater, regular water, waste recycling, and parking. And then as well as we have a small amount of funds in the CPED Enterprise Fund. So the total net position projected year end is about 1.14 million. That's about a $9 million increase from 2023. That's generally driven by parking services and water and sewer. And then cash, as of 2024, we're projecting at about 93 million, which is a $7 million decrease from the end of 2023, last December. That's driven by stormwater and waste. And so this is a fairly stable. They certainly needed enough cash, in working capital to operate, and so we try to keep that pretty consistent. And then finally, just to give a little bit more details into the enterprise fund, you can see that the sanitary sewer, the stormwater, the water, that makes up really the bulk of the net position. I mean, and again, they have quite a bit of assets. It's not really liquid assets, but it's in terms of we can spend them or anything, but it just means they own a lot of capital improvements. A lot has been invested into those areas. In terms of just how things compared to when we were here a month ago talking about the second quarter, sanitary sewer is down by a few million, $3 million or so. Our revenue's down by about $5 million. Expenses down too as well, a little bit to generate. That's because of the downward shift in our proceeds from long-term liabilities. Stormwater, the revenues have been down about $25 million, but spending's down also about $11 million or so in capital from what we projected as of the end of June. And then the other thing I'd mention is the water enterprises are up about $10 million or so. And so the last thing I would mention is I have run some special reports at the request of the city council. So those are available hopefully in the packet of reports that you got today. Otherwise, I do have responses that I'll send out to the whole board for the second quarter questions. I'll take care of that as soon as I get back into my office. I did get some questions from President Brandt earlier today, so those ones I'm going to need some help from some of my colleagues. So I will get back to you on that, but I will send those out for comment and compile a response to all of you. But otherwise, I stand for any other questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Before we continue with comments or questions, I wondered if the clerk would please note that Commissioner Chuktai has joined the meeting in progress. Are there any questions for Mr. Hardgrove? I have several, as you mentioned, and a number of them require consultation with other parts of the budget, but there are perhaps some that either you or Mr. Allen could deal with. Mr. Hoppy, the property tax collection that's down 6.7%, obviously we don't know how that will turn out for anything that's under appeal in court. But for the portion that is not subject to that kind of appeal, does the city typically collect those eventually, either when the taxes are paid as a result of the property being sold and the new owner having to make up the back taxes, or when the property goes tax forfeit?
Yeah, I saw that question. I do want to forward that on to the assessor's office, I believe, that might have some more information. What I would say at this point, obviously the tax court ones, it's unlikely we would probably recover. For the other part of it, for things that are delinquent, I guess you never really know like how much equity is going to be in somebody's property at the end. That's kind of my first observation of it. But I would like to talk to a few people that handle the assessed value and things like that to find out, to see if they have any data on how much actually they do end up recovering in the end. Yeah. So I will try to find out more for you.
Very good. You also referenced the both restricted and unrestricted fund balances for the general fund, I believe it was. And believe you mentioned that the projected $143 million at the end of the year would leave us at 21.5% of the general fund expenditures, which is a margin above the 17% standard that's in the city's policy. Is that, in the eyes of a bond rating agency, are restricted funds sort of put off to the side in terms of measuring the city's financial strength and ability to meet its expenses, and do they only consider unrestricted rather, or is the total of both considered in terms of the city's financial health?
Yeah, I did want to, thanks, President Brand. I did want to consult with Mr. Hoppy on that a little bit. I do think, I think just by definition, unrestricted means, I guess if you looked at your own personal finances, if you had, I need this money because I have to pay it, in 6 months, that's not worth as much as something where you don't have any liabilities against it. But so my gut feeling is, I think unrestricted does count a little bit more, but I do think they both have some impact on the rating.
Okay. And you noted that through quarter three, the sales and special taxes looked very strong. Do you have any feel for whether that is continuing in the 2 months of quarter four that have been completed now, or whether it's even strengthening at all?
President Brandt, Commissioners, I haven't had a chance to look at the books yet on that one, so I do need to send that out too. There's actually quite a few departments that contribute to that revenue category, so I want to get a complete picture, so okay. I can get back to you on that.
All right. And then I think I also asked about the $6 million drop in tort liability that was noted in the report. That's, of course, good news. And I think looking back at your quarter two answers, you suggested that the city views the bump in liability claims and payouts surrounding the events of 2020 as an anomaly, and there's a sense that the claims experience here is returning closer to normal. So this would tend to bear that out?
Yeah, President Brand, Commissioners, yeah, I think that is an early sign that maybe, just maybe, that those liabilities will start to go down.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any other questions or comments? All right, thank you for your presentation. Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to receive and file that presentation. And item 6 is passage of a resolution approving the Board of Estimate and Taxation 2025 budget, appropriation, and levy. As you'll recall, we approved the preliminary 2025 budget, appropriation, and levy at our May 22nd meeting. No changes have been made since then, so this resolution is essentially identical to the preliminary one. It's possible that actions we take today will lead us to amend the budget sometime next year, but for now, I believe this stands. May I please have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that item is approved.
Excuse me, you have to do a roll call for this, President Brandt?
Because it's a resolution, of
Correct.
course. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fry?
Item number 6, correct?
That is correct. Commissioner Abene?
Aye.
Commissioner Payne?
Aye.
Commissioner Chukte?
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson?
Aye.
President Brandt?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
So that item is approved, after all. And we now move on to discussion items. Item 7 is the passage of a resolution authorizing a job listing for an executive secretary. I'll welcome Brenda Miller and Rick Stennerson for a brief presentation.
I'm Rika Stennerson with the Human Resources Department. I'm Director of Total Compensation. Thank you for having us today. Brenda Miller is also with me in case there are questions that she may be able to answer. We are here to talk about the senior advisor position for the Board of Estimate and Taxation. This position, the duties include educating the BET on city and park board finances so it understands the basis for setting the maximum levies and approving certain bond issues, representing the BET between board meetings on levy, budget, and bonding discussions with finance, the mayor's office, and the park board, leading research on topics related to the city levy and bond authorization as assigned by the BET, advising the BET on matters related to departmental budgets prepared and recommended by the city council, mayor, and park board president in the context of funding requirements to support those funds. Thank you. And working with intergovernmental relations to review and inform the BET of legislative actions which may impact the funding sources available to the BET and to communicate any BET recommendations for statutory changes. I just wanted to provide some background information on the situation with this position. So I do want to recognize and acknowledge that there was some miscommunication on our end, and I want to express my sincere apologies for that happening. And I hope that clarifying some of the information today will allow us all to move forward with the position as we have it revised. So the JAQ, or Job Analysis Questionnaire, was initially submitted to classifications on September 10th, 2024, with a request to interview the following members of the hiring committee, and those members are listed here. It included Steve Brandt, Samantha Priest-Hinson, Aisha Chuktai, Dushani Dye, Alan Hoppy, Julia Wiseman. We then gave the position to our external consultant that we normally use for many of the higher level positions at the city, and he asked to schedule interviews with both President Brandt and then Tony Sturl, who was the last person in the BET position. The consultant following those interviews then determined that he had enough information to complete the report, and therefore he did not interview the other members that were requested of him to interview. He then submitted the report to our classification and compensation manager, and without knowing that the original intent was to interview that full group, the manager assigned the salary schedule and submitted it to President Brandt. Once that report then was shared with the committee, HR became aware that the others that were requested to be interviewed were not interviewed, and so we went back to the consultant and asked him to schedule the remaining interviews and revise, if necessary, the report based on all of the findings and including the input from everybody not initially included. So based on the completion of those interviews, the consultant revised the report, finding that the points for this position are at 535 and the grade is grade 11. The consultant submitted the final report to our compensation manager, who then assigned a new salary schedule. And again, I want to apologize for the delay that this has caused and that we did not include those initial people before the first report was released. Once the interviews were completed and the report was revised, as I said, the position came out at a grade 11. The consultant's opinion is that the job is part-time because the number of hours work fluctuates significantly based on the frequency of the BET meetings. So as a part-time role, the 2024 pay schedule would be the following. The hourly rate would be 55.9 up to 66.2. We just calculated an average of 20 hours a week. That would be the range from 58,161 to 68,947. And while the incumbent would be a city employee, the job is not in the classified service and therefore not subject to civil service rules. Just as information points, the decrease in points from the first report to the second, there were 3 categories that had small decreases. They were in decisions, relationships, and efforts. And I believe we did send out the report earlier, so you should have that as background information. There were also things that he noted as far as core finance functions that had moved to finance, property, and services from when the previous incumbent had the position. So that also changed the grade of the position. As far as part-time compensation options, there would be two options to pay a part-time exempt employee. Option one would be the pay based on scheduled hours, regardless of the number of hours actually worked. So the scheduled hours would be stable week over week. The exempt employee must make at least the salary threshold for exempt employees in 2024. That was $844 per week, and in 2025, it's $1,128 per week. Option two would be to treat the employee as a non-exempt and pay on an hourly basis. In this scenario, the individual would just submit the actual hours worked every pay period, and he or she would be paid for the hours actually worked. There's no minimum payment required from an exemption standpoint. Option two is probably the recommendation that HR would recommend for this position. And with that, that concludes our portion of this presentation on the position. We will stand for questions, be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions specific to HR or the presentation? Commissioner Priest-Stinson? Comments? Fair enough.
Thank you. I just want to note that, thank you for apologizing for the miscommunication, but I just want to also name that it's troublesome to me because it went against what this body voted on of what we wanted to happen. So yes, it's a miscommunication, but also it was in direct conflict with what this body voted on that we wanted to see and why. Like, for example, I'm an HR professional director in my day job. I will also just comment, I have other things, but just to start out, I spent an extensive amount of time on a drop of a dime due to said miscommunication. And very little of the analysis included much of what I said. That's concerning to me. And while, yes, there's functions that move to finance and property services, and we've discussed this many times before, that doesn't take into account the independent nature of the board, and that regardless of whose responsibility is like to perform the function on behalf of the city, by the nature of this board, and the responsibility of it, it's not rework, it's asking them it's not rework. And we've kind of had this conversation back and forth, and I just want to acknowledge that piece about the move to finance and property services as a form of who's ultimately responsible, yes, but what we may ask them to do in an independent nature, which is one of the purposes of this board. I just would like to note that. And then also, I do think it's important for the public to know, because we didn't name it here, kind of what the process has been, especially since this iteration of BET wasn't who we started with. So I'd like to name that we inherited, for context, we inherited this decision from the previous BET, who felt it was important to allow for us, the incoming BET, to decide. And so we had some discussion back and forth, and like I've also mentioned many times before, this body doesn't have the we don't have another person to break a tie. And so in this body, we have to come to decisions and work together. And so as a result of being at this kind of standstill between part-time and full-time, and then there was a few other things as well. It was Mayor Fry that was able to come to a compromise and offer, let's try going with a firm and see how that goes. And so we did. It didn't quite work for us for various reasons, and so that landed us back here again, in which we had a different iteration of folks at the seat due to a change in leadership in council within the budget chair and our council president. And so it landed us back in these conversations, in which at that time we didn't take a vote, but there was a majority of our body, at least a large curiosity in which to explore full-time nature of this role, and I think we're all aware of where we stood for the reasons for why for that. So I just wanted to add some context there. Just give me a moment. I wrote some things out, but I don't want to be duplicative. I think that's enough for now. I'd like to let my colleagues weigh in, and then I think I do have, outside of the vote, there are just some procedural things, like just do for like a continuous improvement thing. I think that there's some after discussions that we can have about how to, who knows what the future holds, and like how we can, I often say that when difficulties like this happen, it's not a people issue. It's usually just a systems and process issue. And so I have some ideas about some things that I'd like to see as a result afterwards as far as process. But I'll turn it over to anyone else that might have comments, and then see what else sticks that I might want to share. Thank you.
Do other members of the board have comments? Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that background and context. This is obviously our first cycle, at least myself and Vice President Chuck Tye's first cycle on the BET, and I did follow along a little bit with this discussion about staff support. In my capacity on City Council, I'm also the chair of the Audit Committee, which is, another independent body from City Council and the mayor. And but obviously all of these different bodies have this interplay. And I think one of the things that we are very much learning about, experiencing in real time, is this separation of power and independence from these various bodies that make up the whole of how this institution works. And, my kind of general stance on how these bodies should function is that they should be very high-performing bodies, and or we should relook at whether they exist. I've had pretty extensive conversations with President Brandt about some of the history of the BET, the desire for some folks to actually want to abolish the BET. I'm of the position that if we're going to have a Board of Estimate and Taxation, it should function very well, and I think that a full-time staffer would support that and support the independence of that. And I'm wondering if some of the existing members who have been through a few cycles of this have any perspective that they would want to share when it comes to whether or not it's appropriate to move forward with a part-time position versus a full-time position. And I know, I feel that the mayor in previous discussions had maybe suggested that, our staff within the finance department would be sufficient to support this body. But again, I think I think independence is important. I think if we're going to have this body exist, it should exist fully and with all of the capacity that it has the potential to have, or we actually should have a conversation about whether or not this is the appropriate body for doing this work.
Thank you. One other thing before I get to my additional comments, I would also like to add context that the reason for why the two options, I just want to add that it's not randomized. There was a federal statute that changed around classification of for exempt employees, and so including the own organization that I'm the director for HR, we had to decide whether or not everybody should stay as salaried or whether or not want to be hourly. So it just kind of depends on your budget and what you want to do. And that I just wanted to give some context to why the two choices, and say that I would agree with that those are the two choices to choose from based on this is something that everyone is facing. It's been a slow phase-in. Most organizations and companies were already in compliance, but this last phase that goes into effect at the beginning of the year is when most people are having to make this exact decision we see ahead of us. So I wanted to give that context. The other thing I will say is that, yes, coming into even with my background and working at City Hall, being a first-time elected official and serving as president for the first 2 years, those individuals are there for support, direct in the way that we're allowed to direct, just to be clear. It's very it's frustrating and very slow to get information that you need in real time to make decisions and have information, because you have to send it to the head of that department, who then decides on their time whether that's a priority within those folks' workload. and who's going to get back to you. And obviously, you would have other questions based on what comes in. And so it was very slow. It was quite frustrating. It's not the way, like, yes, I'm an elected official, but it's not the way that I would like to see anybody that's new to anything be onboarded into something that has this level of responsibility. And so there were, without having the background I had and understanding Robert's rules and how things work, it could have been a little bit of a potential nightmare for a new elected official. But with all that being said, with having somebody in place for a very small amount of time, Mr. Sturl, it was what I needed for support. It was what we all needed. And again, we have a right to have information in the independent nature, the way in which we would like to see it, the way that we need it, the way that we need it broken down. I don't think any of us are financially illiterate, but there's no qualification for any of us that we have to have a certain financial background. And so even the breakdown of information that we need in different spreadsheets, we need it how we need to see it. And it shouldn't be an argument, and nobody should have to give their firstborn child in order to get information in the way that they need to see it and digest it in order to make decisions, informed decisions, and have the information in the ways that they need to see it broken down and perhaps disaggregated. And so from speaking from the point that Council President Payne just asked from, and also knowing, like any elected official, every elected official runs on some sort of a platform, and they come into office trying to move things. That is not new. It's not novel. And so with that being said, even within these seats, folks might not think there's things that people want to move, but they do, and we have, and I did. The public housing levy being one of them. And so the work and the research and the coordination between intergovernmental bodies, doing that with a firm certainly wasn't helpful. They're not here. They don't have access to information. They also have to ask. And so it was just another group of people to be left with the same frustration I had, that got paid way more money than I do to do this. And it was quite costly and cost us more than if we had just hired the full-time person. And we'll be transparent to say that was with wanting to do a capital audit. And so that was part of the reason for the larger expense. So I'm not going to pretend that that wasn't a thing. But even take that out, it actually still cost us more due to the payment schedule of, depending on who was touching the work, their payment schedule was the more qualified that person was that had to touch it, the more that they cost. So everybody within their org would touch it, and for several hours, and it was costly when we could have just done this. I'm happy that we found a middle ground and that we tried it a different way, and that even in a different form of this body, we were willing to try something different. And I would like to break the theme of that it's not always one way, and that we're willing to give. We gave one way, it'd be nice to go another way, but it is also in the best interest of not just this set of elected officials. We may not be sitting here a year from now, but whoever comes in is going to need that level of support and coordination and research and the ability to move whatever agenda that they have, if it's the will of the body, to include managing a work plan. I will also say that if we keep it as it is, at this level of pay, given the things that we're overseeing, and this is an employee who should be developed, who should be overseen, who should be managed properly, who should have somebody they report to that is available, we would be looking at increasing our pay, because $400 a month to manage, to properly supervise someone at this level, I don't think that's fair or equitable at all. And I'd rather not have that conversation when we're raising taxes as it is. But, you know, that's the give and take of this. And so I think putting this at a full-time position where someone's not doing the same thing that, well, President Brandt is retired now, but certainly not doing the same thing as me, where I do give this role the attention and the priority it deserves. And, you know, I'm also managing my full-time job. Certainly, you can't, a living wage in this city is not $400 a month. And so, this person needs to be here and be able to do all of the things, to include the fluctuation that you could give every single one of us a task up here. and it would take us a different amount of time to complete it based on our approach and what we need to get it done. So there are deviations in just simply how people work and their approach to work, the level of their relationships, and there's fluctuation. And so I just professionally do not agree that there's so much fluctuation that this isn't this isn't full-time work. I don't believe that. It's not just my opinion, it's also in my professional opinion, as an HR professional that is a director in my full-time job. And if I was doing this work that I do on a regular basis, this would be a full-time position. And that is where I stand, and I think that it is in the best interest of this body, future iterations of this body. I think it's in the best interest of city staff that doesn't need to be bothered with prioritizing these requests, because our city staff is stressed, specifically our budget office and our finance office. That's not new. That was the case even when I was a staffer here. And I think it's just in the best interest of everyone, especially the people that they serve, especially the people that are elected to this role, have the proper support that they need in order to meet their obligation that they made when they raised their hand and took an oath to do this job. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. I would like to comment, and I'd just like to encapsulate some things I've said over the years about this position. In 2019, when the previous incumbent full-time executive secretary retired, the decision was made by the board at that time not to replace him with a full-time person. Mr. Hoppy was hired and lasted in the position for a period of time, and then made a probably economically rational decision to assume full-time position with the finance department. And then the board hired another part-time executive secretary, Mr. Sturl, who's been referenced before, and he found that the lack of benefits put him in an untenable family situation. And so he left for another position. So we've had two part-time people in this job. The previous board, the board that Commissioner Priest-Ensign and I replaced in 2022, early 2022, was poised to boost the position to full-time, and at the last minute punted the decision to the new board. Commissioner Priest-Ensign and I came in and recommended moved a full-time person in the position. The board deadlocked at that time. We went to the mayor's suggestion of a consultant, which I believe was made in good faith. It cost us at least $130,000. I think we found out through experience that was just not a cost-effective way of managing the position. So for most of 2024, we've been without a BET staffer, and I find that I feel as if we are working backwards. We do not have institutional memory in the position. We do not have a record kept in the same way that a full-time employee, such as Mr. Qualley did before his retirement in 2019. And I think it's time to try another door. And so I have brought forward a resolution today, and I have actually a substitute which would adopt the pay schedule that is in the JAQ, except it would boost it to 40 hours a week. And do I need to offer that as a substitute, and do we need to vote on that? Okay. May I have a motion to offer that substitute? Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just curious. I see that we also have on our agenda adopting our budget for BET. Are we going to have to make an amendment to that as well to reflect any action we take here?
Yes, I mentioned earlier in the meeting that we would eventually need to amend our budget, but I think that appropriate time for that would be when we are at the point of bringing somebody on so that we know how much of the year we'll have to pay for the person's salary. Does that sound acceptable to you?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, the resolution is before us, labeled Grant Amendment. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 President
Roll call, excuse me.
Calling the roll on President Brandt's amendment to item 7. Is this correct?
Substitute, on the substitute, yes.
Substitute.
Sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Fry. Commissioner Abene.
Aye.
Commissioner Payne.
Aye.
Commissioner Chukte.
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes and 1 nay.
So now we have the amended or the substituted resolution before us. Is there any discussion? All right, all those, let's see,
It's
we will
fine.
need to
It's
call.
fine.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Brandt. I guess I'll just weigh in a little bit. You know, I wasn't here the first year with the 2 directly elected members of the BET, but I do think you've given it the old college try. And I would say we have a couple of examples where outside consultants have missed the mark, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it sounds like this HR review partially, and then really, I think we had some issues with some of the report that we got on the capital investment in the city. So I think having someone that is available to, focus on this work and prioritize it, because I think that's been the problem. Again, no shade. This is a busy organization. If it's not a primary duty, it may sometimes fall away. So I think that would be a benefit. I heard also, I think, Vice President Priest-Stinson mentioned the retired man's duties included some things that have rolled into finance. I don't know if it's possible to eventually look and see if there's other duties could come back if it made sense. I'll say one last thing. I did have some good interactions with people in the finance department in this calendar year during this cycle of work, but it would have been nice to have a more robust opportunity to have some questions actually explored a little bit more deeply. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Any further discussion? All right, the clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner Fry.
No.
Commissioner Abene.
Aye.
Commissioner Payne.
Aye.
Commissioner Chukte.
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes and 1 nay.
Okay, that item is approved. Item 8 is approving the information request memo protocol. I'll welcome the city clerk, Casey Carl, to speak to this item.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Priest-Stinson, Commissioners. This was an item you'll recall a few months ago that was brought forward as a means of ensuring follow-up on questions that the board and its members may have respecting the duties and functions of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And I wanted to sort of level set by saying this is based on a new process that the City Council debuted this year. It was Council President Payne who developed this process, and we have used it, I think, fairly effectively this year during the Council's first of the 2-year term that we're in currently. The process is really intended to do 5 things. First, it closes communication loops between the elected body and with the administration and staff. It assures public transparency and access to information. It provides equal access to all members of the body, in this case, the commissioners. Fourth, it enhances the public record of the BET's business and its transactions. And I think fifth, perhaps most importantly, helps to inform your decision-making. I heard that mentioned by the vice chair. And so wanted to say that, yes, this is something that I think has the impact of helping to inform your decision-making. There is a memo in your packet sort of that outlines the process that we put together. This mirrors very much the process that exists for the City Council. A few key differences. This is a process that would be limited to, of course, your own staff, a way for the body to formally ask for information, follow-up, or details from the executive secretary once that position is hired, and then also could be used for follow-up communications and responses with those staff who have a direct relationship with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And as it says here, that specifically is the Chief Financial Officer, who is also the Chief Financial Officer of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the City Attorney, who is the Attorney of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and the City Clerk, who under your bylaws is the Clerk of the Board. So in addition to the Executive Secretary, who is this body's position or employee, there are the 3 additional employees that could be requested to provide follow-up information in response to this. Anyone else within the administration, any other departments, of course, under the mayor's authority, that request would be directed to the mayor. And in the procedures, we put forward out sort of the process and how it works. The clerk's office tends to be the, I'll say, switching center where things come and go in terms of sending out the request to the appropriate individuals and then gathering the responsive information back and making sure that it's timely shared with commissioners. On the back, you can see an example of what this memo looks like. So we have a process of submitting to all of the commissioners an email. The email will have a subject heading line to make sure that we're communicating back. It was this agenda item, it was this subject matter. We ask the clerks to very carefully document the specific questions that are asked. They document those questions, send them to the responsive official or department. We ask that the departments take those exact same questions and put their responses beneath those questions. So it really is a very tight, closed loop between what the body is asking for and the information that the staff can provide. So that's a high-level synopsis of the process that exists for council, what we would propose to mirror for you, and how that would work. Happy to stand for any questions if there are any.
Commissioner Priest Stinson.
I just want to thank you for adapting that. You heard our call, and I will also say that I also like that this maybe not eliminates, but greatly reduces the ability to accidentally break quorum with all the replying. And so I love that it makes us compliant, and I wouldn't expect anything less from our trusty clerk, Mr. Carl. But I do appreciate this. It was greatly needed, and I think this will help, especially in the interim until we get someone in. I think this will greatly help for us to get some of the need that we've been asking for, and so just appreciative that you heard the call and made some adaptation, and thank you for that.
Absolutely.
This looks good to me.
Is there any other discussion? All right, I have a question. Thank you for working this up for us. I appreciate the work. How do we proceed to adopt this as our protocol? I don't see a resolution on our agenda. Do we just, do I ask for a motion to adopt the protocol? Would that be appropriate?
President Brandt, you can simply make a motion to adopt it.
And will that require a roll call vote?
No.
Okay. All right. I will make a motion to adopt the protocol as presented by City Clerk Casey Carl.
I'll second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
The protocol is adopted. The ayes have it. And now we have the honorary resolution that was presented at the beginning of the meeting concerning our clerk, Lisa Brock. And I wondered if all the members of the board would like to join with me as authors of this resolution. Hearing no objection, that will be so done. And any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It has to be a roll call vote, President
Oh,
Brandt.
yes, resolution, another resolution. All right, we will call the roll. Clerk will please call the roll on the resolution praising the clerk.
Commissioner Fry.
Aye.
Abene.
Aye.
Payne.
Aye.
Chuktai.
Aye.
Vice President Priest Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
All right, the resolution is adopted. We next have on our agenda the announcements section. And at the risk of tearing fresh scabs off of fresh wounds, because this body did vote on a maximum levy earlier this year, and for some of it, it was a tough vote to support 8.1 or in some cases 8.2 or 3. I read that the City Council has acted, and I wondered if first the Council President could bring us up to date on where the levy ended up, and if the Mayor has any comments to add, I'm perfectly willing to hear from him as well.
Thank you, President Brandt. Yes, so as we all recall, or maybe I should say this more for the public, the mayor recommends a budget that comes out in August. We took action on that budget and levy recommendation in September. During our September meeting, I brought a motion along with Vice President Chuck Tai to increase the levy to accommodate some of the requests from the Minneapolis Park Board, specifically to address some of their labor costs through their new negotiated agreement and youth programming. And we made some soft commitments, if I recall, around using our role on City Council to interrogate the rest of those spending proposals in the mayor's recommended budget through our deliberations that wrapped up very late last night, around midnight. We were able to find roughly over $7 million in the mayor's recommended budget to reduce the levy. So in August, the mayor's recommended levy was 8.1. We took action on this body to increase that number to 8.3. And then through the work of City Council, we brought that number down to 6.8. That was passed late last night at midnight. The clerks were still compiling the packet to deliver to the mayor for his consideration. Kind of as I was coming upstairs, it's been delivered. But we did get an announcement from the mayor through a press release that he did have intentions on vetoing that. So we will see what happens tomorrow when we take up that veto on City Council.
Mayor Frey, Commissioner Frey, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I appreciate and support the council's appetite to decrease the levy. I supported the 6.8 or 6.9% levy, would have also supported a 6.4% levy, which I proposed in a motion. I signed the levy increase at that 6.9 figure. My opposition in general stemmed from the fact that the amount of spending very significantly increased, about $6.5 million. And that $6.5 million does impact taxpayers in the coming years. And so that doesn't go on the levy this year because it's additional spending that was available in the form, it was reserve funds largely, but there are other funds as well. But certainly that will have an impact to the tax levy next year, or perhaps even the years after. So the money is money, and none of it's free.
All right, Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
Just a point of clarification, I understand the reserve funds. Just a quick question is just, so that last part that you said, I just want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly. Being that it's not the 8.1 you proposed, wouldn't that have also been money as money? Like that, are you saying it's just by the nature of what they were, how the money was moved, that particular thing would have come from reserves, or would that also have been the same case in your higher levy? I'm just trying to understand the reserves and the money is money part. Is what was different about what you proposed versus what they proposed? Is it theirs is coming from a different funding source? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying in proper context.
I think I understand your question, Madam Vice President. There were increases to the council's proposal in addition to the levy reduction. Okay. There's a levy reduction, but then there were increases which in large part were paid for out of reserves. And
Understood.
So we have to have reserves, and those reserves are generally funded. Anytime we spend money, whether it's in the form of ongoing or one time, it has an impact on our ability to draw down the levy for the following year. And so this would have an impact here.
Okay, that clarified that for me. And then just one quick follow-up. if hypothetically that this moves through, would the reserves move to a level of concern for you? I mean, I think in general what you're naming is of concern to you, but how much are the reserves tapped in this scenario if it moves forward and your veto is they're able to successfully turn down your veto?
So if they overrode the veto, it would be at the figure that was left, which is below the recommended amount, but above the legally required amount. The concern. Well, do you have any other questions?
That answered it
Yeah,
for
okay.
me. Like I just wanted to know how close, and we have heard many times about specifically to the point you named, which is what I was getting at, and that does it for me. The difference between less than we would like, but still within the legally required limit. So that does it for me. I know it's still fresh and you guys are working things out, but just it helped me to just understand contextually exactly that comment, and that did it for me. Thank you, Mayor Fry.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Chukte.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just, wanted to speak to this this piece on new spending, the use of reserves. Mr. President, I know you started by saying I don't want to, open up, things that are already in process right now. But since the Vice President asked, I just wanted to address the question. Within the city's overall almost $9 billion budget, the amendments made by the council account for under 1.5% of the overall budget. That's the place of disagreement we're starting from. That's all, 1.5%, barely. Council amendments combined, to be transparent, account for just north of $25 million, so about $27 million. And a lot of that money is earmarks within budgets. It's not taking money from a department to give to another, but just about $27 million. Of that, like $3.5 million is coming out of out of fund balance. Far more significant amount was used in the recommended budget in the first place. Another example you could look to of reserves or touching money that is a cushion for a rainy day. Downtown assets is a really good example of this. Sales tax revenue. The projected year-end balance for 2025 for that fund is $85 million, and that accounts for the $42 million that was transferred by the mayor in the recommended budget, and yes, we took an additional. Let me give you an exact number, $2.25 million. So, there are tough choices that we have to make, but what I want to make sure you are walking away with is understanding that we across the board moved less money around than is being purported. We took less out of savings than is being purported, and certainly significantly less than what was taken in the recommended budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope there's no further discussion. I was just seeking information today, and again, I don't want to rehash the differences between the mayor and the council, but I appreciate the fact that you enlightened us here as people who voted on the levy in September. Seeing no further business to come before the board today, this meeting is adjourned.